Well then, so apologies, this is out a day later. I kind of finished work yesterday, went meant to record, was gonna have a quick 20-minute nap and it turned into like 3 hours of sleep, so I was a little bit tired. But we're here now. We got new patch 10.3 and some interesting archetypes got looked at. Specifically Wild Hunt, Elves, and Congregate, and I'm yet to sort of properly try them out. But my first guesses would be that Elves are viable, Congregate's viable, Wild Hunt's still on the lower end of decks. Like, it's playable, but not very good. And the other decks didn't really touch too much. So, just a quick thing before we get started with all this. My name's Anari, if you've not watched my stuff before, and this is a 6 faction 6 decks video. And the general idea of this is I outline 6 decks that I kind of want to try out this season to kind of give you ideas for stuff to try out. Now, this isn't a meta report by any means. This isn't me saying these are the best decks for every faction or anything like that. So yeah, if you get a 20% win rate, that's not on me, all right. Now, I also have some older decks that I've just tweaked because some factions I'm not as interested in playing this season, but they're still decent choices, and I'll probably play a couple of games for rank placement and that kind of thing. But the real interesting ones are like Skeletail and Syndicate. So yeah, without further ado, we'll go into the decks. For monsters, I don't think it's going to be surprising that I'm trying out Wild Hunt. And I think this deck's relatively like obvious how to build it. So you're running pretty much the same stuff you always run, Eridin, Oberon, basically all the Wild Hunt cards, and it's just a very solid tempo deck. Very like mid-range in the sense that you can't just play for a fair bit of value, which means that you kind of can get run over by not control decks, sorry, by engine kind of decks, but you can typically compete quite well, and you're in a really nice situation to push in round 2 and take like a nice shot round 3. But it has seen some improvements. So firstly, Oberon now isn't random, and basically you can play any bronze you have in your deck. Any Wild Hunt bronze, sorry. So this kind of has some nice implications. So firstly, you can go for just a solid player Conqueror. If you got Frost on the opposite row and you play this in round 3, Conqueror will come down as a 9 with Veil, which is just solid. Other options you have is Wild Hunt Riders, because you are now guaranteed to get it. You can just leave the 2 in deck. It's a really high tempo play to basically play Oberon as a 5. The Wild Hunt Rider comes down as a 5, and it pulls 2 from deck. It's an 18-point play. And then you also have Bruiser, Naglfar, Taskmaster, Warrior, and Hound. So you have a lot of flexibility in the kind of ones you can play. In terms of the weirder stuff, the Griffin, what you're looking to do with Griffins is have your Imlerith in hand, you draw into your Griffin, Imlerith you play out, you send your Griffin to the graveyard, so that when you play Mamuna later, you can use the Griffin in your graveyard, boost it up to 11, pull the Griffin out of deck. Something to keep in mind when you do pull it from deck, if you do have Sabbath, that Griffin is going to destroy a unit, so just keep in mind, either play it when you're going to be below Sabbath, or when you have something like Gels or like a power unit, something like that on the board that you don't really mind killing. We've actually not gone super heavy on the Frost, just because I feel like it's not an amazing choice to go like heavy on Frost, really. We do have like a copy of Red Riders and 2 Naglfar crew, just very, very good, and an Eridin. But we are running a Winter Queen. I've never really been a fan of her. I wasn't really a fan of her in the old version, back when she was like a Thrive card, and now she kind of feels like she doesn't do a great deal. So yeah, we just cut that in favour of chucking in a Cave Troll, getting in like Old Spear Tip, that sort of combination. And yeah, it's just a typical kind of thing. If you want to win round one, play out round two relatively fast so that you can have a nice short round where you just kind of play Oberon, Mamuna, and walk away with like 30 odd points in 2 or 3 cards. Honestly, really wasn't sure what to do for Nilfgaard. The only real changes have been to Mage Assassins, a provision boost, and pretty much the rest of it's been untouched. I honestly think Assimilate needs a bit of a look at, but that's a thing for another day. Um, One thing I probably will end up playing this season, it's kind of inevitable, is I'll end up playing some Rien's Clog, because I kind of love this deck. It's obviously been turned down since the changes to how clogging works. You can't really just chuck a load of 1 or 2 power tokens into your opponent's deck, which is a little bit annoying. But yeah, the general changes I just made was cut out an Alba Cavalry, cut out an Assassinate, cooked in a couple of Tortoises, good to go. If you've never played this deck, I'll give a real quick sort of overview of how you play it. What you're looking to do is basically thin down to basically nothing in your deck and clog your opponent. So Cynthia adds a card to your opponent's deck. Cutted Weapons will add them to your deck, to their deck. Viper Witches will, and off Golgaved you can get another Viper Witcher should you so please. And also Golgaved, you can use the ability on that to put a card in your opponent's deck. So while your opponent's deck is getting more and more cards added in, you're thinning out really, really efficiently. So Dead Man's Tongue thins out 2 cards from your deck. Roach and Knickers, 2 cards out of your deck. You also have Mage Assassins and Afan, so you use Blightmaker to get one of those out, and then your leader ability, when you have, say, Afan and a Mage Assassin in hand, play your leader ability, put those 2 on top of your deck, they'll come straight out. And what this kind of ends up with is you thin down to basically nothing, so that you can just play Fulgrim behind a defender, and whatever your opponent plays, you can play Rience in response to that. And Rika, which you may not have seen this card, not too common outside of like a Rience deck, his power becomes the power of your opponent's most recent played unit. So say your opponent plays an 8, you play Rience while Rika's in your deck, just kill that 8 straight away. Then should Rience survive for a turn, set the power of unit to match the number of cards in your deck. Now, if you're doing this in round 3, you're either going to have like 1 or 0 cards left in your deck, so you can just kill another unit of your opponents. And really, that's the game plan. It's thin really heavily, clog up your opponent. Colgrim's going to be an engine that's going to tick for 7, 8, 9, God knows how many points a turn. You have a huge points drop when you play Snowdrop and your leader ability. Rience can remove a ton of stuff, and because we're kind of shuffling our hand quite a bit with Snowdrop and your leader, Sunset Wanderers can get quite tall, so that's pretty good if you're getting pushed or anything like that. And although I think there's stronger things to use for Nilfgaard, this is just kind of what I find fun, and it's definitely playable. I've got solid win rates with it, so yeah, it's pretty fun. Pretty fun if it's even if it's getting a little old now. It's been around for quite a while. So for NR, we've a bit of a blast from the past a little bit. I'm gonna play some Commandos, and what I'm gonna play with this is the typical kind of stuff you'd run with like Foltest and Roach and all your Commandos and Blue Stripe Scouts to add Commandos to your deck. If you've never played Commandos, the general idea is you're looking to get as many Blue Stripes Commandos in your deck as possible, so that when you use the order on your Blue Stripes Commander, you can get even more out of your deck. It's kind of a thing that can go a little bit out of control, because if you can set up a Donomir, put Foltest next to it, and have a Blue Stripes, you're adding a 5-power Blue Stripes to the deck every turn. You can absolutely fill up your board with them. And on top of that, we also run Siege, because why not have another thing going on? And to account for that, we got a lot of bronzes that are basically Siege engines, got the ballistas in there. We have Siege Masters as well, just because they thin really nicely. Siege Ladder, because should you be in a position where you have a lot of Blue Stripe Scouts, Blue Stripe Commanders even, you can then move one to the front row. If that row is completely jammed, spawn more. And then like rewards for thinning and all that typical stuff. One of the weird cards you may have seen in here is King Bellahoon. I chucked this in. I'm going to see how it goes because they've recently changed him, and he seems pretty decent. You know, he's a 6 for 8, and when you have diversion, because I wouldn't use this outside of diversion, whenever you play a unit with power less than 6, it boosts them up to 6. Seems really good, to be honest. Considering you could say play reinforced ballistas, just standard ballistas, Radovich Royal Guards, Kerat Marines, all that kind of thing, and including your commandos and your Stripe Scouts, playing for a lot of points. Adding those extra points on top is really, really big. So, for example, Reinforced Ballista is already a bit of a pain at like 3 power, 1 armor, or you can have it at 4 power, 1 armor, but boosting it all the way up to 6 power, 1 armor makes it kind of unkillable. Basically unkillable with everything but tall removal. So, I mean, it's something I'm trying out. We're running Donomir as well, so we may as well, if we're going to go for a protecting our stuff kind of angle, we may as well super green chuck in a Bellahoon. And of course we have Pavetta as well, or the inevitable, all your commanders in the graveyard, you just Pavetta, put them all back in, and then round 3 you just play like 15 commanders or something like that and win by like 50 points. So it's pretty fun deck. I haven't played it in quite a few seasons, so I'm kind of excited to go back to it and see how it gets on. Now, this is the one I've been the most excited to talk about and try out. A lot of times I've tried to get a elf racial kind of deck going, just going really heavy on the Dead Eyes and Death and all the sort of elf synergies. It's always felt a little underwhelming, but there's been some really big buffs to the whole Dead Eyes archetype, which was really, really nice. So Venosial had a provision change, Isengrim's been boosted by 2, Ruvial got buffed, Waylays got buffed, Golbathanor Archer got changed and is probably a buff in this kind of deck. So there's a lot of stuff to try out. Now, there's kind of 2 directions I'm going to go with this when I end up playing this kind of deck. Firstly, I do want to try at some point going for a Vanadin to create a load of Waylays and using Simless to use all those Waylays, just because that is a super, super fun deck. And now it's just been buffed to the absolute stratosphere because of the changes to Waylay, so that's going to be a real fun one to try out. But with this deck, what we're going for is we have Saskia, because Saskia is basically a you win round 1 card. It's very, very hard for your opponent to actually fight around where Saskia has been played. So you can play Saskia in round 1, get your Dwarf Mercenaries out, get Dryad Matrons, Abandoned Girls. Basically, you're generating a huge, huge amount of points off Saskia, as well as thinning out really efficiently. And then we have Feign Death and all the elves, and basically you end up absolutely swarming your board of elves. And you can have use like Venosial the pings with your Dead Eyes should you be able to generate enough. If not, she's just a solid 11 for 11 play that generates elves on the board. Isengrim plays as a 6 for 8 plus 1 for every single elf, so it's kind of insane. Teruvial is super good now. And obviously we have Simless, so we can go double Bountiful Harvest, or if we've like played Fanadin earlier and we've got a ton of Waylays in deck, we can go for like 4 Waylays off Simless, and 4 Waylays off Simless plays for 26 points. 26 points now, provided there's enough stuff to damage, and it's going to generate 4 Dead Eyes, which of course with an Osseal is going to be super nice to basically delete your opponent's entire board. And yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to try this. I tried to actually get this working before, and now that it's been a buffed archetype, I'm super excited for it. Now, Skellige, kind of a boring one. Mainly because the archetypes for Skellige are they're on like the playable, on the good side of playable, which is a really nice thing. I'm definitely not going to complain because I do love a bit of Skellige, so it's nice to see quite a few archetypes playable. So there's very minimal changes apart from a couple of nerfs to test each skirmishers. So really all I made a change of was cutting a raiding fleet for a warmonger, playing pirates. And although you're probably very used to seeing pirates on the ladder, it's a deck that I personally really playing. It's super fun to play this kind of deck. Really enjoy constantly dealing damage to stuff. I'm a simple man. I'm a simple man. Tons of damage pings, lots of very consistent mid-range cards, and if you can get crack and crit to stick on the board, you can just stop your opponent being able to play anything. So it's kind of great, to be honest. If you've never played Pirates before, don't know how to play against it, I guess. What goes on with the deck is you want to probably play like your crack in round 1 to then Fukusha it in round 3, so you can kind of use it as dominant both rounds. And as you deal damage to your opponent's stuff, so as it becomes damaged, all your pirates and boats in hand get armor, and so the synergies with things like Terror of the Seas and Dim and Light Longship, and just generally keeping your stuff protected, is kind of amazing. And at the moment, I think it will really dominate, because I think a lot of people are going to be trying elves, Wild Hunt, and typically that's going to be a very good matchup because both are looking to deal quite a bit of damage to you, and you have armor on basically everything. That's just not going to happen. So yeah, this deck's been dominant on ladder for a reason. It's very strong, and it doesn't hurt that it's very playable as well. It feels really nice to play. And one thing that I think is like debated is whether you should go non-diversion and with like Sunset Wanderers, cut out the King Bran, cut out the Scordell, that kind of thing, go non-diversion. I'm personally more of the mind of thinking diversion's a little bit better, because King Bran is surprisingly good. I'm always very surprised by how good he is, because you get that 8 for 11 minimum in round 3, just a solid play. All of your pirates are kind of with veteran are gaining an extra point, so your TIG your Ankrit Raiders, your Tersic Invaders, and of course Scordell, who gets basically 2 points of value from King Bran. He's already providing a ton of value there, and he works really nicely with Crack and Crit. So King Bran will boost himself whenever a unit is kind of damaged by more points than it has. So if you deal 7 damage to something with 5 health, when you play your King Bran later, he's going to boost himself by 1. And the way Crack and Crit works is you basically do a duel between a pirate you play and your opponent's lowest unit. Because of your armor, your units aren't really taking any damage. You just end up having almost like a Keltolis effect of destroying their smallest stuff, but it's also bumping up King Bran. And I've kind of noticed he's very consistent and feels really good. The one problem I have with Sunset Wanderer's side is this deck typically doesn't go very tall. You don't end up with many green health units at all, whereas Sunset Wanderer just gives your opponent so much value on things like spores, a Morkvark of their own, and the diversion deck just doesn't give them that value, which is kind of why I lean towards this style of deck. So yeah, if you're just looking for wins on ladder, this is probably the to go, because it's ridiculously good. Now, I know this is the one you've been waiting for, and it's Congregate. So the Fire Swan cards have had some nice changes. Obviously I won't go over every single one. I did do a video like a couple of days ago when the patch came out to sort of go over the changes and how I felt about them. But my general thought about it is, most of them are pretty good. It definitely offers quite a few new things. One of the most important changes was Damnation's just been completely reworked. So the way this now works is you destroy an allied unit and create a Fire Swan unit, and the provision cost of the created unit is 4 plus the power of the unit you destroyed. How you can just play this to kill a 2 power, just a standard zealot, to create a Fallen Knight, easy. There are also options where you go, quite a bit higher. You destroy, for example, a 4 power unit. You can get a Lieutenant von Hurst. You destroy a 6 power unit. You can get a Helvi, a 7 power unit. You can get an Ulrich. If you can somehow destroy an 8, you can get a Hemmelfart. So there's a lot of options there. I think typically you're looking at that, getting another Von Hurst kind of level. But I mean, whatever you can get away with, you can get away with. And alongside that, we're just running a ton of Swarm, which is then gives us huge payoff from things like Sacred Flame and Dies Irae and Keeper of the Flame. We're looking to swarm the board with lots of little units your opponent doesn't really care about destroying, and then buffing them all. So it's a surprisingly simple deck. Really quite simple. You're just looking for 2 nice long rounds where you can just get this value. And that's kind of it. That is kind of it. But it's always very fun. It doesn't require a great amount of mental input. You just kind of slam down a ton of units and hope for the best. One thing you kind of have to be a bit afraid of is Tall Punish, and of course things like Shiru, because you're both going tall and wide on the board, which is typically not a great idea, because you can get punished by either side. Because your Fallen Knights can get super, super tall. We're talking like 20-point Fallen Knights. And of course, with a very swarmed board, a Shiru is kind of a death sentence. Yeah, there's a lot of things to look out for. Just be aware of. You can definitely get punished by this, by your opponent quite easily because of just naturally the way the deck plays. But it's fun. And what more can I say? It's a very fun Syndicate deck. And it's a lot more fun than Jackpot. So that's the direction I'm going with that. Now, that pretty much wraps up everything. I am actually recording this on my lunch break, so I should probably get this edited and posted and get back to work. But I will, second I finish work and once I get back from gym, be playing all these lovely decks. So if you have any success with these kind of decks, let me know, because I always love to hear that my decks have been helping people out. In terms of like future videos, I will definitely be covering some of these, doing a bit of a more in-depth guide on some of these, so you can have a bit more of an insight into that, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, I've already prattled on for long enough about this stuff, so I will call it there. I appreciate you all watching, hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next one.